everyone, this is Miss Cave with a lesson on angle measurements. So you should have received a circle from class. If you didn't, you can make your own or see me for a copy of the circle. So today we explored relationships between supplementary, complementary, vertical, and adjacent relationships. So we're going to make a little foldable so that we can have a record of this in our notebooks. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to fold your circle into half, like so. And so you have a half circle. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take our pen and we're going to draw a line down the center of the circle, like so. Okay. If you have a protractor while we do this activity, that's fabulous. If you don't, you can just record the measurements that we come up with together. So we're going to start by looking at the relationship between supplementary angles. So once we have our half circle, what I'm going to do is my center of the circle appears to be about here. I'm going to draw a line from the center to the edge of the circle, like so. Okay. So now I have two angles. I'm going to label this angle angle 1. I'm going to label this one angle 2. And I'm going to go ahead and measure one of these with my protractor. And again, you can use your protractor or you can just estimate the angles that you have. So I can see that this is an acute angle. So I'm going to use the numbers at the bottom. And it looks to be about 52 to 53 degrees. So we're going to say that angle measurement is about 53 degrees. And I'm going to measure angle 2 as well with my protractor. And I'm going to see that if that is 53, this would be about 127 degrees. Okay. Now, when I look at those two angles together, I can see that together this angle, angle 1 and angle 2, form what kind of line or what kind of angle? A straight angle. So I have a straight angle, and today we discovered that angles that when they form a straight angle, they together are equal to 180 degrees. Do you have a question? Okay, so these are called, so we're going to go ahead and define supplementary angles. And supplementary angles form a straight line. So that's a way we're going to remember it. Supplementary starts with S. They form a straight angle. And what's also true about supplementary angles, they form a straight angle, just like we said. Their measurements together total 180 degrees. So what that means is that angle 1 plus angle 2, because I know that they're a straight angle, I know they're supplementary, I know that they must be equal to 180 degrees. And to determine for sure if that's true, I can take these two measurements and add them together. So angle 1 is 53 degrees. Angle 2 is 127 degrees. And if I add those two numbers together, if they are indeed supplementary, they would form a 180 degree angle or a straight angle. Okay, the other thing I want you guys to know about supplementary angles, although these two are right next to each other or they're also adjacent, they do not have to be adjacent. So they can be on different parts of a diagram. We'll look at that later. They don't have to be right next to each other to be supplementary. You can have two angles. So for example, let me show you. So I could have this angle here, and then I could have an angle over here. And if this angle is 40 degrees, and this angle is 140 degrees, together they still are 180 degrees, even though they're not adjacent. Because when I put them together, no matter where they are in an angle diagram, they're equal to 180 degrees. I can still say that they're supplementary. They do not have to be adjacent, but often they are adjacent. All right, so that's supplementary angles. Next, we're going to look at complementary angles. So I'm going to turn this, and I'm going to go ahead and fold this in half again the other direction so I can get a quarter, because we learned today that complementary angles form right angles. So now I've made a fold here, and I'm going to take my pen and just take my line down here. And so now I'll turn it this way so I have room for us to talk about complementary angles. So complementary angles, I'm going to do the same thing. They form a right angle. This is a right angle. I'm going to subdivide this right angle into two angles. So I'm going to take this and make a line like so. All right. And I'm going to measure each of the angles. And it looks like this one is about 28 degrees. And this one should be 62 degrees, yep. And together they form complementary. So these two angles together, if I add them together, they form a right angle. So these type of angles are called complementary angles. Complementary angles, the first thing about them that we discovered today is they form a right angle. Their measurements total 90 degrees. And just like supplementary angles don't have to be adjacent, they do not have to be. They can be. That's why I stress have to be. They don't have to be, but they can be adjacent. So you could have, just like our diagram over here, you could have two angles that are complementary, like 30 and 60, or 10 and 80. They could be far apart from one another and still be complementary. So I know that these two are, we can prove that these two angles are complementary because I can add them together. 28 degrees, this angle, plus 62 degrees gives us 90 degrees, which is a right angle. So now we have this 1/4 left, and for this part here we're just going to talk about the last two type of angles that we described today. And so I'm just going to make an X here. And a line here. So that we can talk about vertical and adjacent angles. So if I were to measure, let's say, this angle, and I'm going to approximate it because it doesn't go all the way across. We'll say that that angle is about 35 degrees. Okay, if I know this angle is 35 degrees, what do I know is true about this angle? It's also how many degrees? 35 degrees. Okay, and that the reason we know that is because of vertical angles. vertical angles. Okay. And what's true about vertical angles? They share a vertex. They are across from one another. And they have the same measurement. Okay, so we know that they're vertical, and then they also share, as we talked about in class, they also are going to share the same two lines. So the two lines on this 35-degree angle are the same as the two lines on the other. And now the very last thing we're going to talk about is, do you guys remember the last type of angle? Starts with an A? Adjacent. So adjacent angles, they're right next to each other. So we could say that if this is 35, I know that this angle here is 145. And those two angles there, these are adjacent angles. Okay, they're adjacent because they share a side and a vertex. They're next to each other. Do you guys know what else they are? They're adjacent angles, and they're also what? What do they appear to be? They're not only adjacent, but they're also what type of angles? Not complementary, but what? Supplementary. Okay. Very nice. That is our lesson on angles. We'll be exploring these relationships and applying them in class tomorrow. Have a great day.